Hi everyone, in this video I'll be showing you how to make these flowers, and I'm actually only using one pattern for these flowers, but I'll show you the different ways that you can make it. And the stitches that we'll be using to make this flower are slip stitch, chain, single crochet, half double crochet, and treble crochet. But I will also briefly explain how to do these stitches as we're going along. First, we can go over the materials that we'll need to use. I'm using size 4 cotton yarn, scissors, a large needle for yarn, and a 5mm crochet hook. Keep in mind that you can use whichever size yarn or hook that you prefer. It'll just change the size of the flower. To start, I'll make 4 chains. And then I'll slip stitch into the very first chain in order to make a circle. Then I'll make 4 more chains and slip stitch into the center of the circle you just made. Chain 4 again, slip stitch into the middle of the circle again, and do this 3 more times, so at the end you should have 5 total. And here you can see it's already starting to look like a flower. Next, we're going to work our stitches into the next little petal. Start by making 2 single crochets. And then make 1 half double crochet. In order to make a half double crochet, yarn over once. Insert your hook into the center of the petal, pull your yarn through to make another loop on the hook, and yarn over again. At this point, you should have 4 loops on your hook, and pull the first loop through the last 3 loops on the hook. And that is the half double crochet. Next, make a double crochet into the same petal. To create a double crochet, yarn over to create another loop on your hook. Insert your hook into the middle of the petal and pull the yarn through to make another loop on the hook. So now you should have 3 loops on the hook, and yarn over again to make a 4th loop on your hook. Pull the first loop through the first 2 loops. So you should have 2 loops left on the hook. Yarn over again to create 3 loops on the hook, and pull the first loop through the last 2 loops. And that is the double crochet. Next, make a treble crochet into the same petal. To make a treble crochet, wrap your yarn around your hook to make 2 more loops on your hook. So you should have 3 total. Insert your hook into the middle of the petal and pull the yarn through. At this point, you should have 4 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull the first loop through the next 2 loops. At this point, you should have 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull the first loop through the next 2 loops. At this point, you should have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull the first loop through the last 2 loops. And that is the treble crochet. Next, make a double crochet into the same petal. Make a half double crochet into the same petal. And then make 2 single crochets. Next, make a slip stitch into the center. And that is the first part of one of the petals. And follow the same pattern for the next 4 petals. So 2 single crochets, 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, 1 treble crochet, 1 double crochet, 1 half double crochet, 2 single crochets, and a slip stitch in the center. And once you've completed that, you have the first part of the flower done. And you can actually leave the flower like this if you want a smaller flower. And I'll show you how I use the smaller flower later on in the video. Next, we need to make the next row of stitches for each petal. To start, I'll make a slip stitch into the first 3 stitches. In the next stitch, I'll make 2 double crochets into the same stitch. And then in the middle stitch, I'll make 1 double crochet, 1 treble crochet, and 1 double crochet into the same stitch. In the next stitch, I'll make 2 double crochets again into the same stitch. And then I'll make a slip stitch into the last 3 stitches. And then 1 slip stitch into the center of the flower. And I'll repeat the same pattern for each petal. 3 slip stitches, 2 double crochets into the same stitch, 1 double crochet, 1 treble crochet, and 1 double crochet into the middle stitch, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, and 1 slip stitch into the last 3 stitches, and then 1 slip stitch into the center of the flower. And once you complete that, you can tie off your yarn. And I weaved in the pieces of yarn that were left. And next I'll show you how I add yarn to decorate the flower. I'll grab the large needle and the color of yarn that I want to use. And you need to cut the yarn, but when you cut it you want to make sure it's pretty long so that you don't run out of yarn. I flipped the flower over and attached the new color of yarn to the back. I basically just weaved it through one of the loops in the back and tied it off. And then I pulled the yarn through the center of the flower. And I chose a spot that was off to the side and a little bit lower to make the first stitch. And then I put my needle back through the center. And I chose a spot that was in the center and higher up on the petal. And then I brought my needle back through the center and chose a spot that was kind of the same as the first stitch that I made. It was lower but off to the other side. And I brought my needle back through the center, and then I continued this pattern for the rest of the petals. And then once I got to the end, I found a spot in the back to weave in the last piece of the yarn through. And I tied it off. And then I weaved in the last pieces of yarn. And once that was done, the flower is complete. I really love this one. I think it looks like a hibiscus. Next, I'll tell you how I made the next flower. And I started by making the first part of the pattern. So I made the chains for all 5 petals, and then I made the first row of stitches for each petal. But instead of continuing with the same color, I tied off the yarn when I was finished with the last petal. Then I brought in another color of yarn, and I started the next row by making a slip stitch into the center of the flower with the new color. And then I completed the pattern with the new color. So I just made the second row of stitches for each petal. And I weaved in the ends of the yarn. And that's the completed flower. I think this one is my favorite. It reminds me of a Plumeria flower. Next, I'll tell you how I made the next flower. I only did the first row of stitches for each petal, so I kept it as a small flower. And I weaved in the ends of the yarn. And this is what it looked like without adding anything to it. But then I decided I wanted to add pink to it. So I started it the same way by making a slip stitch through the center of the flower. But this time I just slip stitched into each stitch of the petal. And after I did the last stitch, I slip stitched into the center of the flower. And then I repeated that for each petal. And then once I reached the last petal, I tied it off and I weaved in the remaining ends. And this is what that flower looks like. I really like this one as well. It reminds me of a 70s flower. I also ended up making a regular red flower, and this is what that one looks like. It's basically the same flower that I made in the beginning, but without adding any additional yarn for decoration. Alright, that's the tutorial for the crochet flowers. I hope that you enjoyed them, and if you like this content and want to see more, please feel free to subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.